having a fantastic, whatever day it is that you're watching this. So it is, as far as dates go, the 18th of December. So we're basically coming in to the last 2 weeks of the last month of the year. 2022 is coming, and it's gonna hit us hard with direct connection. Now, I know I talked a little bit about direct connection in the last live, but this is kind of a good time to bring up the fact that we were at least rumored to start hearing about the direct connection power brokers network circa way back in, I don't know, the 15th of the month. But the problem is that never really happened, at least not with any pomp and circumstance. In fact, I've been searching now for quite a while to find that list of 100 power brokers, and apparently that rumor, at least in terms of release date, wound up not to be true. Sean's in. What's up, brother? Got the arm flex. I like it. So I did find out who a couple of the power brokers were going to be coming into 2022 for at least Houston, Texas. And it looks like we're going to get 3. It is hot and steamy, by the way. Southeast Texas weather has a funny habit of not really knowing what it's doing. So I got to get my AC cranking over here. At any rate, there hasn't really been any pomp and circumstance to this. And I guess that's really more to the point. Interesting that we're coming up on the Christmas buying season, and that would have been a great marketing opportunity for direct connection to connect you directly with the power you need to get your Christmas off and running. Just Dodge, call me. You need some marketing guys. They need a guy to talk to. That's me. So anyway, we're missing out on this. And the thing that really is kind of sad is that the only parts that we've seen have been, well, the stage kits, at least that we've seen with any descriptions. And that's a bit of a bummer. And I'm really hoping that coming into January, we're going to see something miraculous happen with Dodge to where we can start to see the products and start to get a hold of these products. I know that I have got money just waiting to be spent in this respect. But the reality is, well, with the new year coming and, well, with the fact that we don't have any direct line of sight to anything that may be coming soon, I don't know that my patience is going to be able to wait that long. In other words, let me ask you this. What about you guys? Let's say you're in the market for a drive shaft. If direct connection is going to give you access to a red-eye drive shaft, do you sit around and wait on it? We're coming up on boost weather. See, that's the other side of this argument. Well, sort of the other side. I guess the other side of the marketing decision on this. It's December. We've got January, February, and that's it. 2 months to play around with these things in some markets, and maybe a little bit into March. But a lot of the guys are trying to get their cars ready for the drag strip, and boost weather requires, for a lot of guys, especially folks that have been putting in some work, drive shafts, half shafts, maybe some other neato parts that they can put on the thing right out of that direct connection catalog, and it doesn't seem to be happening. So at least coming into 2022, I'm hoping that we get a chance to see the full catalog as opposed to just teaser bits and pieces. Let me ask you guys, how interested are you in that type of a rollout? And to that point, are you willing to wait on direct connection? The thing is that they're not even teasing catalogs at this point. When are we supposed to get direct connected? Guys, I am one of the highest flyers of the Mopar flag, especially with this 3rd gen stuff. I can't tell you how excited I am about direct connection, and I guess that my criticism at this point is really only just unrequited desire to get in there and start buying up stuff for my car, for lack of a better way of putting it. But the reality is that we're not getting a taste. And unless you've got a red eye, how many of you guys got red eyes? Unless you've got a red eye right now, what do you really have to look forward to? I mean, we're all sitting around waiting on the parts bin to open up, and that's great. But what about for the, I don't know, car that kind of got this thing going, the Hellcat, or the car that really got this thing going, the 392, or the granddaddy of the whole thing, the 5.7? Where's the upshot? Where's the gain on this? In terms of timeline, we're going to miss out on boost weather, parts buying season for boost weather. And I'm looking at this like you got 2 weeks and you've got 3 days of next week, 3 days of the week after that. So basically you only have more or less a week worth of buying time before you're going to be into next year. You're going to be outside of boost weather and hoping that you can sell cars through direct connection with the direct connection upgrades. I'm telling you, if there would have been an opportunity for a red-eye drive shaft, some half shafts, maybe a little bit of an idea in terms of differences in torque converters, start to leak some things out on the catalog and start shooting out tech ideas. Something, anything. But the problem is all that we have right now is, well, there's going to be some direct connections. There's going to be a hotline. There's going to be somebody to talk to. Guys, I got news for you. So far, the only people that I've talked to, and again, this could be getting a little bit ahead of the curve here. In fact, it may be way putting the cart before the horse, if you know what I mean. But the people that I've talked to don't really have answers right now. They can't tell you what's coming. Nobody's leaking anything. Nobody's saying, man, listen, you're going to love this. We've got this, that, all kinds of cool stuff. 392 is going to get this. All the NA cars, the platform's going to get these upgrades. You got suspension. You got blah, 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 blah. Nothing. All it is right now is a tease for a hurry up and wait. Are any of you guys going to hurry up and wait on this? Makes it kind of tough, right? Anyway, let me catch up with you guys real quick. Sean is in. Frederick saying, what's cooking, B? Got the arm flex, ball guy with the shades. I like it. VA saying, good evening. Hall Dodge in Virginia Beach is one of the power brokers. Very nice. So it looks like we've got Healthman, Macock Dodge, and Bayway here in Houston. That's the rumor, but I'm not 100% sure if that's the actual bottom of the list for Houston. Chuck saying, hello, everyone. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Chuck. Gary saying, hello, everyone. Dad's Garage saying, I don't understand why they would bring it back if they are dumping the V8s. Well, thing is that they are dumping the V8s, but they had practically dumped the V8s once before. 440s, 426s, any of the more potent LA platforms, and they kind of had direct connection, or at least Mopar performance parts for those engines. So there's that. But it makes sense if you're going to be part of the aftermarket to stay with it. There's a ton of V8s out there, and it's not like when they start selling EVs and quit selling V8s, the V8s don't evaporate. So the aftermarket's going to stay on top of that, and they're going to be around for a long, long time. So it's their opportunity to get ahead of this and offer some folks something that might actually be cool for once. What I mean by that is maybe offer the 392 guys something. Dad's Garage saying Merry Christmas all. So I'm a little bit, not necessarily annoyed, but I feel a little bit disappointed, really. It was reported at one point that we were going to have this release around the 15th of December. The 15th of December is come and gone. And again, that wasn't necessarily coming from Dodge. I think that was more of a rumor. Ended up not happening. And so now we're left kind of holding the bag on this, hoping that Dodge comes out with some kind of an announcement. It'd be cool if they dropped something on Christmas, maybe New Year's. Give us some idea. When is the catalog going to be available? I guess would be my first question. When can we get the catalog? That's going to be one of the more important aspects of it. Don't need the hotline, don't need the power brokers. I know everybody's supposed to be going through training or whatever. I just want to see the parts. What's going to be the first year parts offering? And I understand that parts offering can bloom into other things as time progresses. But last I heard, they were only talking about a 2-year run, even with this, which, if that does end up being the case, is a little bit of a... that's yet to be seen. I'm just hoping that once they do release the catalog, they've got products available, ready to buy. You go in and buy the stuff, and they can have their hotline and everything else moving into that. But again, since nobody's leaked anything, and because nobody's really talking about it on the internet, which is another kind of weird thing, I'm left to wonder, when is it actually going to get up and running? Do yourself a favor. Go online and Google direct connection updates. The only thing you're going to get is a bunch of articles, links to sites that are hovering somewhere around November 5th to November 20th. Nothing in December has even been spoken about direct connection. And I'll venture to say this: there are a group of people that may have been somewhat interested on the front end of this that have already forgotten about direct connection, have already moved on past it. I'm hoping that's not necessarily the case moving forward. In other words, I'm hoping that doesn't snowball. But by announcing a direct connection and having this direct connection initiative, you've got to keep that out in front of folks. If you don't keep that out in front of people, they're just going to start to forget about it. And when you go to look up direct connection, and there's absolutely nothing online to get you excited, to get you motivated and looking in that direction, the problem with that is that the aftermarket, well, in this case, your direct line of sight competition, is going to be the ones that get the phone calls. So was it a mistake to come into this too hot early on? Not sure. But I can tell you this, I'm still excited about it. And I'm hoping to get into it not only for the parts, but for the swag and everything else. Again, we'll see what ends up happening, but not necessarily holding my breath on this. Oh, him saying, hey B, agree there needs to be some meat and not just bun from Dodge about the direct connection thing. Real talk on that, my friend. For sure. Amy saying, also, am curious to find out who the power brokers are in my neck of the woods. Part of me is interested in ordering a Hellcat, but not if it is MSRP plus or if Dodge isn't actually making cars. I tell you something. You can never go wrong with the Hellcat, especially when you have a parts bin that is just ready for you to jump in the middle of. The Hellcat with a 309 gear and a pedal commander, if nothing else, is a fun ass car to drive. And believe me when I tell you, you are not going into any conflict unarmed if that's the car you're going to go into it with. It's always going to run somewhere in the tens, deeper in the tens than you may have imagined on a drag pack, especially with an unlocked computer in a 309 gear on a drag pack. I was able to run 1030s. So take that for what it's worth. The red eye is a great combination. It's just that it can get a little bit pricey for some guys, albeit worth it for some folks, especially when you option it with the 309 gear from the factory. And when you've got a car that is arguably better in terms of internal components on the engine, although if it ain't breaking, it ain't broke. And the Hellcat factory platform is robust as hell, so you can't really say that it's limited in any way in terms of making power. We've made obscene power with the Hellcat platform. So is the red eye with the better pistons and a slightly more aggressive cam, although you probably wouldn't know it. If you were to look at the specs, it would just be a bit of a blip on the radar more than anything else. Is it worth the money? Some people would argue that it is, especially when you start looking at twin pumps and things like that that the car comes with. But the Hellcat with a 309 gear, again, you just order it right out of the parts catalog, install that, put a pedal commander on it, you got a mid 10-second car in good air, lots of fun, and again, not much is going to be out there that can mess with you on the drag strip. Dodge Reactions in saying Merry Christmas, what's up? Guy saying, yeah, I like it. So the big thing that I'm looking at right now with direct connection, kind of, it has me a little bit concerned. And the reason why it has me a little bit concerned is the fact that, number one, we haven't seen anything yet. Number two, why aren't the power brokers announced yet? And really, in this case, why aren't we seeing the list of parts that are going to be available? I mean, think of it like this. When the announcement first came out, we were shown like basically what amounted to more or less a PowerPoint presentation of different parts as they were scrolling across the screen with suspension bits, transmission bits, and this and that, and the stage kits and everything else. Where is the, how do I put this? Where's the press kit for this? Is there going to be a press kit for the direct connection program? It's kind of a bummer, really, that we don't have that yet. So, anyway, enough about the direct connection program. Got an open chat tonight, so it just depends on what you guys want to chat about. The main thing that a lot of guys have been asking me in DMs, things like that, have been camshaft questions. And it's funny because one of the questions that a lot of guys get is they always ask about what is the most I can get out of something. And I'm curious, I'm often curious as to what the mindset is when I get the question about what do you mean, what is the most? Like, what's the biggest cam you can get? I'll put together some really big cams for Gen 3 Hemis. Great in a race application if you're making a combination spin to 74, 7,500 RPM, a combination that is maybe bumped up a little bit in displacement, gonna hit it with a little bit of Dr. Feelgood. Yeah, I mean, definitely make a 238, 248 cam work for you, but good luck with drivability and good luck with getting somebody to tune it for you. You have to send a setup like that to somebody who absolutely knows what they're doing when it comes to tuning large cammed third gen cars. And those folks are few and far between, by the way. And so what I have kind of default, if you haven't noticed, if you've asked me these questions, my default is 222, 232 is like the split that I would give in terms of duration. You can tighten up or widen up the intake center lines as much as you like, but that's about the direction in terms of maximum that I would say I would put on the street if you want to keep it livable. The issue is when you start getting real tight lobe separation angles with Hemis, they run really good, but they also have absolutely no velocity. And at idle, they basically suck. That's why wide lobe separation angles can be a little bit nicer in that respect, but the wide lobe separation angles make them turds down low with big duration. So it's kind of one of these pick your poison type of a situation. And for the guys that would prefer better idle quality, I've got a couple of cams that work wonders for those guys, but everybody, I say everybody, a lot of the questions have come in the form, I want all the chop, I want all the nasty. Like, you really don't want all the nasty. You so much don't want all the nasty, especially with the Mopar. It's just, they are extremely volumetrically efficient, but thermodynamically, they are not as efficient as a wedge motor still, even though they're kind of a semi-Hemi. And these guys just like, okay, get ready, send it. Hey, Catalyst, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Cal's is asking if I have the DRS rear diff brace for the Hellcat, do you necessarily need to upgrade the drive shaft? Okay, a couple of things with that. First and foremost, if you have a Hellcat that is 2017 and later, and really into 18 and later, those drive shafts are a little bit more robust. We currently are running 2 different cars regularly. And when I say regularly, I mean every weekend that the track is open, these cars are at the drag strip. We've got 2 of them that are running, well, I'm sorry. We have one of them that's running basically high 9s, one that's running mid 10s with stock drive shafts. And they've been doing it now for, I mean, we're counting this in years on those drive shafts. 3-4 years. So what you got to remember is the drive shaft scenario, the drive shaft problem was really an early Hellcat issue. And it was an early Hellcat issue for some guys that were running into wheel hop. These are guys that were maybe a little bit less experienced with cars like this in general. But when I say less experienced with cars like this in general, what I'm really meaning to say is significantly modified Hellcats. But even at that, I mean, we've got one car running 980s, again, another car that runs consistent 1050s, 1040s with no sign that there's any issue whatsoever with the drive shaft. However, these are also cars that don't ever get hit really with any wheel hop. And the wheel hop is what will cause potentially the weak side of the drive shaft to fail. So in my experience, if you're running a good tire, you're getting out of the throttle, if you experience any wheel hop whatsoever, you will be in good shape. Doubt you'll have an issue if you're running a 17 and up drive shaft. If not, you might want to get a drive shaft. Now, the next question is, which drive shaft do you recommend? I've heard good things about the DSS Twin CV drive shaft, but I have never used one personally. The one that I had received, I actually sold on basically the minute that I got it, when our good friend Multiple Mopars bonused the channel with a red-eye drive shaft, and that's the drive shaft that I use. So basically I'm using a stock style drive shaft. Some guys will say, well, that's the heaviest drive shaft of the group. I'll say that that doesn't matter at all. I have never seen a drive shaft appreciably increase the performance of a Hellcat at the drag strip. I just haven't noticed it. I have seen them break, but it's usually, again, in significantly modified cars. The red-eye drive shaft will handle pretty much anything you want to throw at it within reason, but I've seen them handle a crazy amount of power. The other thing about the red-eye drive shaft, or just running a stock drive shaft in general, 17 and up, preferably 18 and up, is that they are silky smooth at any speed. And that is really the most important part of this. The last thing you want in your life is to have a slight vibration that starts at just respectable highway speeds, 75 miles an hour to be exact. And that's with a 309 gear. With a 262, you'll start to get a bit of that vibration around 85 to 90 miles an hour. The bottom line is this: when you start messing with drive shafts in the odd, and it is kind of an odd angle that they're in there at. It's not directly in line. They're actually a little bit of an angle. When you start messing with that would be the carrier bearing. I mean, the drive shaft isn't directly in line. It's a little bit of an angle. When you start messing with the drive shaft in those cars, I literally, how many did I go through? I went through, well, I had the stock one, and then I went with a Wiles, which was a disaster, and then I went with I had to get another Wiles, which was even worse than the first one. Then I had a DSS with the CV joint in front, and the, was it CV joint? No. It's CV joint in the back, regular U joint up front. That was terrible in terms of vibration. And, obviously you put the stock drive shaft back in and it was perfect. So if you're thinking about getting a drive shaft, the main things you have to look at are, number one, how often are you going to be taken to the drag strip? Number two, what are the modifications that you have to your car? And if those answers are not very often, and I'm going to keep it at less than 700 horsepower to the rear wheels, in essence you're just going to keep it somewhere in the 980 range to 1020 range at the drag strip on a drag pack, probably be okay with the stock drive shaft. And to be honest, the 15s and 16s would hold up just fine. I mean, we had guys with hundreds of passes on stock 15 and 16 drive shafts. They just weren't launching them to the moon, and these are cars that were pretty stock. So there's that. But hopefully that answers the question. You don't necessarily need to upgrade it, but there's a couple of caveats to answering that. But thank you very much. I appreciate the contribution, my friend. Arthur saying, good evening. Oh, Dodge is saying he's conked out, subbing and liking. Thank you very much, buddy. DM saying, good evening. Would the Red Eye 309 rear end and drive shaft work with a 2016 Hellcat, or would I have to go with one offered for the 392? Well, to be honest with you, I'd go with the one offered for the 392, only because that's the one that I went with. It's also the one that all of us are using. I just don't think the one that's offered for the Red Eye would be necessary, and you can absolutely use the Red Eye drive shaft with that diff. So, and I know this because that's what I'm doing right now. So it's actually my preferred combination, and it's the combination that all of us have run now for years and years on some level. In fact, the 309 that I recently took out of my car, I just took it out, serviced it, and it's sitting on the floor of the shop over here. I mean, it's a legitimate upgrade from all facets of fun, performance, really no loss of fuel economy to speak of. And I think you'll like it. And again, that along with the Red Eye drive shaft, which, assuming that it comes available, is well worth it if you are hammering on the car if you're modified. If not, then you can stick with your stock drive shaft. It'll bolt up just as well as any other ones will. You'll be in really good shape. And like I say, I've had a lot of fun with mine. Cannot complain. Dodge is out for the evening. Oh, Hibbyhead saying, been doing the 25/8 sweepstakes. Oh yeah, jump on your 25/8 sweepstakes, guys. Entry, and my favorite is Cinnamon Stick, Red Eye Hellcat at 87 grand with a 309. And you get the good drive stuff. Would it be it would be a trip to win, right? Yeah, it'd be a total trip. But good luck. Yeah, that would be a fun car. Hey, Dad's Garage is in. Thank you very much. Dad's is asking, what is the chat schedule with the holidays landing on Saturdays the next 2 weeks? I'll still be doing them, more than likely. Yeah, so I'll probably still be doing the chats. We do all of our holiday stuff early, so. But thank you very much for the contribution, my friend. Just saw right here at the bottom, Randy's checking in from Tennessee. Love me some Tennessee. I was saying, hold on to those 5.7. The Tornado 3-liter inline-six is coming with more power and torque and more potential. Yeah. I'm so excited about this. So anyway, you guys know I'm a nerd for inline-six turbo stuff. And y'all have heard me talking about this for a while. So when the inline-six was first rumored, it was going to be a truck motor. And then that bled into, well, we could possibly see it in the new platform, the LX platform replacement, and now come to find out that some of that may be true. And if it does wind up being true, it is going to be unimaginably hard not to pick one up, because 3-liter with a turbo, comes from the factory with a turbo. I would be very interested to see what kind of nasty we could make with one of those things. We'll see, though. I'm hoping that it's going to be robust and durable and manageable for guys that want to put some power to them. But look, let's just put it to you like this. If it's an inline-six, twin cam, comes with a turbo, how bad could it possibly be, right? I don't want to answer that question. DM, man, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Didn't have a question with it, but contribution accepted. Thank you very much. Saying thank you, sir. No, thank you. Man, that is awesome, brother. Hopefully I can answer a question for you. But thank you very much. Yeah, that's very generous, brother. Thank you. Chuck saying, when I changed out my spark plugs to NGK, there was a nasty red gunk all over them. My text said the octane booster, which is what it was, and running too high of an octane caused it. I've been running 89 and 91 now. Well, yeah, if you're running octane booster and you don't need to run octane booster, because you can't really do anything with the extra timing for any of the NA platforms. And guys, look, I have done a lot of timing sweeps. Good Lord, this AC is cranking, my bro. I've done a lot of timing sweeps with these cars, and the timing values from the timing values that you see, like the 17, 18, 19 degrees of timing, things like that, that's also, there's a base timing that's included with that. But the Hemis 5.7, 6.4, they start to get a little bit insensitive to timing. Good grief, kid. They start to get a little bit insensitive to timing around the indicated 18 to 19 degree mark. So if you're not going to make any more power, and this is regardless of fuel, by the way, this is actually running them on corn. So if you're on E85, you can maybe cheat a 392 up to 20 degrees of total timing, which is to say that it's kind of the equivalent of running them at 30 degrees of timing or 32 degrees of timing with the base numbers, because the base numbers never indicated. But the reality is that you're just not going to get anything more out of them, and we've tried. In fact, we had Quick Brig's car on the dyno, and basically did a timing sweep from 17 to, I think it ended up at 23 degrees of timing. And we let the car, so we go 17, 18, 20, 22, 23. Like, the thing is once it stops making power, your timing is done. Every so often, you'll find one where you'll go timing a little bit less, timing a little bit more, and then the next timing sweep, you might get a slightly higher bump. But the reality is that you might get that, especially if you're stretching the engine out and really arcing the thing for a longer RPM range. And that little bump that you get in power, the curve, like from your point of view, would come up and then it'll kind of slightly carry up a little further before it flattens out. That's going to be way on the other side of the dyno chart. So to give you an idea, you would see something like that. Like this is one of mine here, but you'd see it bump way up in here. Trying to throw timing at it, and that's, I mean, it would be incremental at best if it was even going to be in there. So the thing is that if you've got an NA combination and you try to throw octane booster at it, you're not necessarily going to lose any power. You're just not going to gain any power. The idea with the octane booster is it allows you to capture timing that you couldn't capture otherwise with your combination, because let's say you're running real high compression in that combination. That could be a reason why you would want to have the octane booster in the car, because you are in fact under-timed on pump gasoline, whether it's 91, 93 octane, what have you. Or if you've got a boosted application, but that's really not what we're talking about. So just kind of an FYI, we haven't seen any difference in timing with the Hemis where they would just magically pick up some amount of power with an amount of timing. It just didn't really work out that way. And again, when you're looking at 17 degrees, 18 degrees, 19 degrees, and you're just struggling to even see any change in the graph, no need to even try to throw octane booster at it, because you're still within the knock threshold of the gasoline that you're using, be it 91 or 93. It's just you're starting to get into the point where it could be overtimed. So, and that's for stock. I mean, obviously every combination is a little bit different, but the stock combinations, or even the more mild combinations, small cam, ported intake, big throttle body, the whole bit, you still don't see any difference with timing. Especially when you start to look at, really high quality 93 octane versus even E85. But thank you very much. I appreciate that DM again. And Catalyst. And Dad's Garage. Thanks, guys. Himmyhead saying, I've heard that Boostain will turn your plugs orange if you use it a lot. That is correct. You can see that. If you're using it a ton, it will, but I've never seen any adverse effects with it, at least not in terms of how the cars run. In fact, one of the cars I was just talking about, that car has Boostain in it all the time, but it's not a lot. We're only talking about a couple of ounces. And to give you guys an idea, a couple of ounces is basically, when you do a shot, that's almost a couple of ounces. So it's like a little shot glass full of the stuff. And it's just there more or less to stabilize it. You're at 3 ounces compared to, 9 or 10 gallons is kind of hard to even find realistically. A lot of the guys will overdo it when it comes to Boostain. They'll see the back of the can. I got the can right behind me. They'll see the back of the can. They go, man, I can get all this octane, because they think octane makes power, and it absolutely does not. Callis is saying he's got a 16. Yeah, might want to look at a drive shaft on that. But again, not entirely necessary. Just depends on how you're using the car, brother. Got to remember, look, man, I ran my car in a stock drive shaft for a long time. Had a lot of passes on mine. And you can't even tell. Like, you look at my drive shaft, there's no wear on that thing at all. My drive shaft might have 7,000 miles on it. BB's checking in. Say hi. What's up, man? Oh, Ken saying he's got the new twin DSS CV drive shaft in his red eye. It is very smooth and no vibrations at 160 and 10 pounds lighter. That's good to hear. That's one of the things that I had heard. The reports on that drive shaft are that it is really good. So if it's clean at 160, that is real important. I would see, like, I got to the point with mine. not the twin CV, but just the single. And by the way, I had the absolute first twin CV that they made for public consumption, and I was even spooked to put it on my car. So, but I can tell you that the single CV would get bad. It was significantly noticeable at speeds that my car would regularly see, 130, 135 miles an hour. It was, I don't want to use the word alarming, but it was bad enough to where I felt like it was not good for the car. So if that's the case with that twin CV, super stoked to hear about that. Again, Randy's in from Tennessee. I like it. Thank you again, DM. Oh, Dad's saying you're welcome and glad the chats will still be rolling. For sure. DM saying thank you, sir. Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to change that. I don't think we're doing anything on Christmas. But, I don't know. Should be. DM saying thank you, sir. Thank you. Callis is saying, are you doing half mile? You know, it's funny. When I'm doing data logs and when I'm doing load testing, this is actually, like confessions of a tuner type of guy. But you have to run the cars out to a significant mile an hour when you're load testing them. A lot of these guys that will tune the cars and get the data logs on the cars, they don't realize that a lot of Hellcat and Red Eye owners, those cars regularly see 130, 140, 150, 60 miles an hour because it doesn't take that long to get there, and they're stable as you would never believe. And they go, man, 160 miles an hour, that's fast. Remember, guys, fast is a feeling, not a number. And I can tell you that 140, 150 miles an hour in an LX platform is less concerning than 110 miles an hour in Foxy or 90 miles an hour in Sierra. So, yeah, there's that at least to consider. I mean, you've got to load test them out to some pretty significant mile per hour, especially if these guys are going to be running them. So, yeah. Doug's saying, like and subscribe. Yes. Randy's saying, smash the like button. Texas Side is saying, just picked up a Hellcat. Is there any go-to names, big tuners who are proven for these cars? Yeah, there are. And it is well worth it to get with somebody who specifically speaks Mopar. So, depending on where your location is, I can tell you that Peitz, that's P-E-I-T-Z, Performance in Houston would be my first recommendation. I used to work there. I know Alex and the crew over there extremely well. Alex is the guy that teach people how to tune cars. He flies all over the planet teaching classes on the subject. So definitely the guy that you want with your Mopar. And the reality with this is there's a lot of folks that kind of know how to tune Mopar, but the reality is that there are some things about the Dodge that if you get it wrong, things can go pretty badly. Less is more in this business. And again, like I said, I used to work at Peitz, and with the Hellcat that I have, I've basically set and then reset the 93 octane records with that. So just depends on what your altitude is and where you're located. But, if you're in the Denver area, it'd be RPM, be range performance. If you're in, I think the Northeast area, HHP is a good one. Josh over at HHP. So there's some good guys that are out there, but let me just put it to you this way. It is not cheap to work on these cars, and it's definitely not cheap when you start factoring in shipping your car here, shipping your car there, or whatever. You can do remote tuning, but remote tuning is going to require you to have an unlocked PCM, tuning software of your own, the whole bit. I would highly recommend considering it as part of, if you're wanting to do significant work on your car, consider it as part of the cost of ownership to have it shipped into Houston to Pikes to have the crew work on it. Because again, unless you are willing to go through the remote tuning part of all of this, which can be a little bit annoying, a little bit frustrating, best bet is to have the car on the dyno and have somebody, again, that speaks fluent Mopar working on your car. Herbert's asking, are front-wheel drive car axles stronger than rear-wheel drive axle cars? Absolutely not. They're considerably less robust for many reasons, primarily because they're just handling less power. So they don't have to be as thick. And without throwing out my bat, giving my snaps up over here, I've got a set of prop shafts, half shafts, for the Hellcat. The right side Hellcat drive shaft, or saying drive shaft, we were just talking about drive shaft, half shaft's about that big around. It is massive. So yeah, not at all nearly as robust as a rear wheel drive. Callus is asking, do I use snap-on tools? Do I have any snap-on tools? I think I used to have a ratchet and it broke. I don't use snap-on. I use kind of crap on. Actually, I whatever I've got in my bin. I use a lot of Harbor Freight, by the way, and I know that that's a bit of a kind of a cringe thing, but I tell you what, never had anything break or go bad. That's the problem, is that people kind of crap on the brand and it's cheap, it's this, it's that, but stuff kind of keeps working. I've really never been burned, to be honest. So, some of the power tools may not have the lifespan that you would hope for. A bit more of a Milwaukee guy, I guess, when it comes to actually paying for something. But now I'm cool with Matco also. Some of the snap-on stuff's pretty good. Donald's asking, does Dodge make a performance cam kit for the 392? Not specifically for the 392. They had the scat packages, but those were older designs, and the newer aftermarket driven, even off-the-shelf cams are significantly better than those cams would have been. And again, those were for 5.7 applications. The newer cams, custom grind stuff, really good. They're really good. As a matter of fact, this last year we had run 1130 with a 4,600 pound car running 157 60 foots. Pretty sick setup. And that car in a Challenger, which would weigh easily 300 pounds less, would have been a 10-second pass. So there's at least that to consider when you're looking at the different cams. I can tell you this. Cams that I would avoid, Comp 274, unless you're going to be putting together a pretty significant blower car. It's actually a really good blower cam. It's a really good positive displacement blower cam specifically. But Comp 270 is a little bit too wide of a lobe separation for my liking. And the 268, it would make for an okay 5.7 cam, although I would, again, like to see the LSA a little bit tighter. But everything else, like I say, Dodge doesn't make it, at least not yet. But again, that's kind of the thing that we're talking about earlier on, was we don't have a clue as far as what Dodge is going to be doing for the NA guys. You know, they're talking about packages that you can still have a factory warranty, which would mean that those packages would then have to be emissions compliant, and they're just probably not going to be doing that. So maybe I'm saying, any advice to get the nothingness out of a TR66? You have a Barton shifter in it. The TR66 has only 1,500 miles on it. You talking about the nut? So are you talking about possibly doing the clutch line mod? Would be about the only thing I can think of that would help you with that. There's a restrictor. There's a little plastic, this little blue plastic restrictor. You got to really get the car up in the air, pull the main hydraulic line off of the cylinder, and you can get a screw and kind of screw it down in there and pull that restrictor out. That can help get some of the vagueness of that clutch pedal out. You can do a search for Challenger clutch restrictor removal, and that'll walk you through the process of how to do it. There was at one point a really good tutorial on it on one of the forums, might have been on Challenger Talk. Anyway, it was a real good kind of not really informal, but it was just kind of a step-by-step process in getting that thing out. So I know that we did quite a few of the restrictor removals, and basically what it does is it just allows the fluid to flow back and forth and makes the shifting a little bit more like what you would have been used to if you'd driven like a cable actuated clutch, like in a Fox body, or if you're used to a hydraulic throwout bearing in like a Corvette or a Camaro. It would make it feel a lot more like that, a little bit more of a direct connection, if you will. But that would be what I would say, is just check that out. Heavy Hand saying brand snobs. Nick saying, hey B, do you see the prices of RTs and 392s and Hellcats getting astronomical since Dodge is discontinuing them in 2 years? Good question. Let me just say this. I would not start filling up a warehouse full of RTs and 392s and Hellcats just yet. The problem that you have with the internal combustion engine cars is it is going to be a nostalgia class more than anything else. They're a lot of fun. They make a lot of good noises. They're fast in their own way. But the reality is that the EVs, if the internet has taught us anything, it's that numbers are all that matters. And the EVs, by all accounts, are going to be faster than what they are replacing. And they will be faster by a magnitude, an order of magnitude that is not only to be found on a drag strip, but on the street. And we're talking a situation where you'll have a car that would run 950s on the street, on the drag strip, or wherever you were. So, oh, and by the way, without the worry of breaking anything, without the concerns of maintenance per se. I mean, there's still maintenance, but you get where I'm going with that. So, will it be collectible? Well, maybe? Question mark. The big reason why I put it that way is because you look at cars now that are commanding nutty numbers. Cars like the Grand National, the T-Type, for example. In fact, my wife and I just saw one the other day. Pretty stoked to see that. Really nice T-Type. Anyway, those cars are, in some people's minds, very collectible. It's like a niche market. But what we're finding is that niche isn't necessarily expanding across the board. You'll have some guys that will spend a fortune to get a GNX, but will completely turn their nose up to a T-Type or a regular Grand National. So, and I'm using that car as an example of what was then transitional technology, V6 with a turbo. It was the first of its kind. It was the first to be just a really badass car sent out into the world. In much the same respect that the 392 cars and the Hellcats were for their day. So, there were a lot of Hellcats that were made. And I don't know when they're going to start to be collectible. And you can make the argument, well, the Grand National by today's standards isn't fast, and it's kind of a, it's collectible because it was kind of rare. It's a one-off thing. Hellcats are not rare by any stretch of the imagination. They made as many as people would buy. They've continued and will continue to make as many as people will buy into 2024. Will the prices go up? No, not really. They'll stay pretty flat where they're at now, just for the general sales lifespan of the platform. The bigger question is, what is the price point going to be of the EV that replaces it? To get similar performance, you need to have similar pricing, and I'm definitely not going to be in the camp of people that are going to shell out an obnoxious amount of money for a car that underperforms by comparison to something that I already have. And by the way, something that I not only already have, but something that I thoroughly enjoy owning, which is in the Hellcat. I can't tell you how happy I am with that car. So to say that this new EV is going to be an order of magnitude better is kind of a tall order when you start to think about it. It's got some serious shoes to fill, and for those guys that maybe have a little bit of a range anxiety, and statistically drag strips aren't really close to anybody so much anymore, so very few guys are going to have these things at drag strips, and that or have access to drag strips, where arguably the Hellcat really only has a lot of value in that environment. At least its value is still very high in that environment. Drag strips. Is this going to be a new era with the EV, with guys where you can take the car out and it's usable power? The Hellcat, being rear-wheel drive and having a lot of power, even on a drag pack on the street, has a hard time hooking up. I mean, it'll hook up, don't get me wrong, but we're not talking prepared surfaces here. And I've been able to prove that you can go middle tens with my car on a drag pack on the street with no prep. So there's that. I mean, I've already done it. But the idea is with the EV, it'll do that on street tires. Kind of crazy. So it's going to depend on who's spending the money. If you're asking if the price is going to go up, if it's going to be collectible later on, everything has a collector. There is a seat for every ass when it comes to some kind of tchotchke that's collectible or neato. But, unless it's got a history behind it, I can think of maybe just a handful of Hellcats that would be collectible. Just a couple of red eyes that might be out there, but it's going to be tough to say that they're really going to be all that collectible. But then again, I am happy to be proven wrong, because look at the stuff out of the 60s and into the 70s that were considered disposable that now people clamor for. It's the weirdest thing ever. Tux is in saying, hey B, how are you? Doing very well. Clay's asking what my opinion is of the new 6-cylinder Turbo 6. I'm excited about it. I am a huge Inline-six turbo fan. So for me, I'm licking my chops, mainly because it makes life real easy if you want to bolt on a Brazilian horsepower onto an engine that, if it's got good pistons, rods, and a crank, can handle an amount of power that you would never try to dream to get out of a 5.7, and it'll give any Hellcat pretty much a run for its money in terms of power and roll racing and things like that. I'm not really worried about what'll it do out of the hole or anything else like this. It's just a completely different driving experience. And I'm reminded of the Supras that I used to drive way back in the day that were, you know, at 75 millimeter turbo on a 2JZ with, you know, just the fixins, you know, basically a 750 horse to the rear wheel car. They were a lot of fun to drive. Like, you've got no idea, if you've never done it before, how fun those things are to drive. So anyway, for what it's worth, I'm extremely excited about it. And hell, I'd have been excited about that engine in a truck. So, I mean, you want to talk about the next resurgence of Little Red Express or the Warlock. I'm sitting there going, dude, don't worry about putting a Hellcat engine in a Ram 1500. Give me the 3-liter with that turbo and watch what I can do with that thing, provided that the transmission will hold together. Oh, Herbert's asking about the 5.7 and 6.4 and, well, even the 6.2 being replaced by the 6. Well, I mean, that's a valid concern for most V8 fans, is that, yes, the 5.7 could be going away. A lot of Dodge loyalists, though, don't want to see the 5.7 go away. I think that the 5.7 could be the introduction and the exit of that platform for us. Meaning that that's the first one that we had, V8 engine that we had coming into this, and then it could be the last V8 that we have, with the 6.2 and the 6.4 presumably going away in 24. But what I can tell you is the Inline-six turbo architecture opens up an amusement park full of possibilities that you could employ in terms of making power. The ease of working on the thing, the ease of packaging that comes with that. It is easier than an LS platform when it comes from the factory, the way that I'm hoping this thing will come to the factory, or come to us from the factory, in terms of intercooling, turbo placement, all of that. Even if the turbo is part of the cylinder head, it doesn't matter. At this stage of the game, there are solutions to that. You will be able to make power with that kind of combination in a way that you would have never been able to make power with a 5.7 or even a 6.4. That combination with a decent set of heads, dual overhead camshafts and the like, it'll be the best of all worlds. And here's how I'm seeing it. I actually thought about doing a show specific to this. It will be the next coming of what you would have seen as the Daytona, as you would have seen from the 80s Dodge hot hatch-esque cars. The Dodge 600 Turbo, which would be front wheel drive, but more to the point, the Starion / Conquest. We're talking about cars that, albeit 4-cylinder and not 6-cylinder turbos, the next evolution of that, the next very fast Dodge Turbo, which Dodge was a huge adopter of back in the day. Just so happens we haven't seen it for 35 years, but they were a huge adopter of that technology back when Ford was kind of into it with the turbo 4-cylinder, and GM had nothing to answer for with that. So because they were such an early adopter, and they were a big early adopter of front engine 4-cylinder turbo combinations, you've got to know that these things are going to be nasty. I'm really in a kind of a can't wait to see where this goes kind of mode. Especially if you can start having the conversation about bigger turbos, bigger injectors, remapping, and not, tuning, cam tuning. the whole bit, where you can really start to narrow this thing down to where, you know, you're accidentally making 650 to the rear wheels. And tell me that wouldn't suck. So let's see. Oh, Nick's asking investment pieces. One of the other questions was, will the prices of the 5.7, 6.4, and 6.2 cars go up when the EVs come out? And really, it was more of a little bit further sight answer than just in the short term. Absolutely not. It's still a depreciating used car, really, at that point. But at some point, will they become a car that is an investment piece? And my response to that is, for some people, yes. You know, again, there's always going to be a market. There's a seat for every ass type of an argument there. But in terms of what could you expect the layout to look like, you know, cars that you can maybe see where they would go a little bit crazy in terms of collectability would again be, it would have to be probably a car with a history. But again, I'm happy to be proven wrong, and history would dictate that pretty much everything starts getting real collectible about 20 to 30 years after it's released. So Cal's is asking, what are some common mistakes you see on performance upgrades, RT 392 and Hellcat? The big mistake I see with RTs is guys trying to take the car too far. When you start looking at the RT, one of my suggestions is just get it tuned. And if you're going to do any performance modifications to the car that are going to require a significant outflow of cash, you are probably going to start kicking yourself for spending the money. A set of long tubes and a full exhaust is always fun with the RTs, provided you've got a solid tune to go along with it. But one of the biggest mistakes I see guys make is they start hacking up the exhaust. And that goes for, I'm going to kind of go for a global here. I'm going to start with a big umbrella, and then I'm going to kind of narrow it down. So I'm going to start off with exhaust. The RTs need some kind of a header, but the issue is that the pricing gets kind of up there for the performance gain that you get. You're almost better off to just go with maybe a tune, and if you can stomach the cost of 370 gear. But the reality is that I probably wouldn't even take it that far with an RT. Where I see guys really running into issues, though, again, kind of an umbrella, get back on track here, is when they start hacking up the exhaust. Mid-muffler deletes, reso deletes, straight pipes, things like that. If you're going to do that, guys, the tone of the car, the tone of the exhaust will be very shrill. It's not a good sound, and loud isn't necessarily a good thing if it just doesn't sound good. Go with an H pipe. If you're going to tear out do a mid muffler and do a reso delete, at least put an H pipe in the car. It will sound far and away better than trying to make the X pipe work. You might pick up a little bit of horsepower with the H over the X, but the reality is that it'll just sound better in general. Also, if you're going to go that route, you might want to do yourself a favor and just throw some race bullets in the thing. That'll also take some of the raspiness out and give it a good sound. It's the sound that you're going for, and you can be loud and still sound good. You don't have to be loud and sound like crap. And make no mistake, if it's loud and it sounds good, you get compliments. If it's loud and it sounds shrill and nobody wants to be around that thing. In fact, we had one on the dyno. Whenever the car would go on the dyno, it just sucked. I was wearing earplugs and the muffles, the Princess Leia things. So there's that. One of the things that I see guys go way wrong with the 392 cars, talked a little bit about the 5.7 stuff. Same really does apply for the 392, where I see a lot of guys make mistakes there is they immediately go to long tubes and they don't take a look at other aspects of the car as well, porting the intake, going with the larger throttle body. That can help the 392s. Depending on what kind of shape that intake is in, but that can definitely help. One of the things that I've tried to talk guys out of is taking 392s too far. Because what ends up happening is, unless you've been gifted, what the hell is in my face? Unless you've been gifted a 392 powered contraption, and or you just got money to burn, the problem with a 392 is that the minute you start throwing money at the 392, you are getting closer and closer to what a Hellcat will perform like in completely stock form. But unfortunately, it's a dragon you will never catch, because with everything done, and I mean everything done to a 392, we're talking cam, not necessarily a converter. We're talking street driven cars here. We're talking cars that you would be able to easily resell. And I'm going to just, that resale thing is going to come back into this conversation here in just a minute. So don't let me forget that, because it plays a big part in this. But for the 5.7 and the 392, where guys, the big deal there is that guys will do modifications to the cars that make them not perform as well as the next car up, but make them more difficult to sell on. And I'm talking specifically now about the 392s, where if you've got, you know, some nasty cam, a lot of hacked up exhaust, you've got something that's a little bit ratty. The problem is you've got a really nice car that you've turned into something that nobody really wants to own anymore. And you will, by the way, get to that point with it. When you get to that point with that car, you're now going to have to spend a significant amount of money to put it back into a condition where people would want to buy it. Another thing about all of them, basically across the board, is guys will go cheap when it comes to exhaust systems. Don't understand this. You've got what amounts to an expensive car. You need to put an exhaust system on it that is appropriate for the car that you bought. When guys go in and start hacking up exhaust, go with mid-muffler deletes or mid-muffler and reso deletes, it takes away from the car so much that it just diminishes the thing. Like you wouldn't believe, when there are arguably significantly more expensive options, but they are well worth the money. Just remember, if you're spending the money, you would kind of maybe like to see some of it back at some point. But if you're going in and hacking up your factory exhaust, it's going to be kind of hard to find a factory exhaust to replace what you've got with, unless you get one out of a junkyard, which may or may not be a good opportunity for you. So get you an aftermarket exhaust, if that's at all possible, just so that if you're sick of it, you can swap it or sell it. The big mistake that I see with guys that are going to keep their cars, the 5.7 cars, the 6.4 cars, for guys that are going to keep their cars and are going to keep it long term and just want to bump in power, the 5.7 guys just need to go straight to the supercharger. Don't waste your time with anything else with those cars. Go straight to the E-Force, call it a done deal. It's going to be very drivable, fast, fun as hell to drive, and you don't have to worry about drivability issues at that point. For the 392 guys, I would say, look, if you're going to keep the car long term and you are not planning on ever getting rid of it, Hellcat is not in your future, you want to keep and hold what you got, go with a small cam, long tubes, ported intake, larger throttle body, and that'll put you in a position to where you could go low 11s. You have a low 11-second car, a legit low 11-second car in good air, certainly in significantly decent air, you'd be 1130s. Again, you are not going into any conflict unarmed in that kind of a situation. You'll have good top end power, be able to pull Mustangs and stuff like that, not a problem. but leave it at that. Don't try to go nuts or anything like that outside of that. You're still spending significant money. Now, let's talk about the Hellcats. Where do guys go wrong? Well, where Hellcat guys go wrong, and by the way, that's, NA guys, that's it for the NA guys. Now I'm going to talk specifically about the Hellcat, the Red Eye guys. Number one place where they go wrong is, and this is probably question number two that I get a lot, as far as what are my opinions on. Anybody that sells you a pulley that is a no-tune pulley without specifically vetting that client or that customer in terms of where do you live, don't ever do that. There's no such thing as a pulley that is a no-tune required pulley. It doesn't exist. I, unfortunately, had the unfortunate opportunity to watch a guy basically, I think, blow his car up at the drag strip with one of those no-tune required pulleys. And it basically happened like this. The guy asked me to take a look at his data log, and his data log basically it looked pretty rough, to be honest with you. The car was pulling 7 degrees or 8 degrees of timing. Injector duty cycle was at 112%. Fuel pressure was doing its best to hit 67 psi. By the way, you're commanding basically almost 80 in the tune. And so what was happening is the car was more or less going into freak out, flip out mode because it was seeing a ton of boost with a tire fuel pump and had no way to deal with it other than to basically pull everything back. The car was slower and it had an injured fuel pump at that. The guy had no idea what he was doing. So the problem that I see with Hellcat owners, number one, they don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to read a data log, and they're being basically sold a bill of goods that is a bad idea. I mean, it's the equivalent of smoking a Big Mac, like a pack of Big Macs a day. That's how much damage they're doing to the cars in low altitudes by trying to go with one of these Incognitus or the no tune required upper pulley or whatever the case was. I mean, I can't tell you how bad of an idea that is. So that's number one, number two, and number three on my list of things to not ever do. The second thing is having somebody mess with a Hellcat that doesn't speak fluent Mopar. It's weird, but you would see this. Oh my God, this is so. So when I worked at Pikes, one of the things that we saw over and 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 over again, you'd think that all we ever worked on were Hellcats, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to get a Hellcat. I've seen the hell that they can go through and still come out the other side smelling like a rose. But it was bizarre what you would find. You would see guys that would put booster pumps on a Hellcat and then try to run E85 with a booster pump on stock injectors. That happened a couple of times. Oh, by the way, if you are planning on putting a pulley on a Hellcat, you are putting injectors on your Hellcat. There is no pulley that does not require injectors. Period. Period. I don't care what pulley it is. Doesn't matter to me. You can say, well, you can command more fuel pressure. No. 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 You need bigger injectors. Period. I don't care what tuner you're talking to. If the tuner that you're talking to says that you don't need larger injectors, ask them if they're really sure about that. Let me explain to you the reason why. If you live in lower altitudes, the required amount of fuel that you will need, along with the added, by the way, amount of fuel that you will need, along with the higher fuel air ratios that you're going to be running, that's going to require a larger injector. My car, stock Hellcats, with a tune, you will regularly see 91, 92, 93% injector duty cycle. That's at stock boost. So since we're talking about stock boost, what do you think it's going to look like with Mo Boost? Pick a number that sounds like Mo. So with Mo Boost, you need Mo fuel. And if you're already at 91, 92% in clean air, you add 5% more power to the car, 10% more power with that pulley. How are you not going to put injectors in it? Because if you throw 10% more power, which is kind of what you would need to do to just feel the difference, at these power levels, you've got to really ramp them up and pull power out of them. You're going to be over 100%. 10% more power, 10% more fuel. Now you're at 103% injector duty cycle. Maybe there's some overhead there, but I don't really trust that. Put bigger injectors on it. I guess the overwhelming value to really get to the bottom here is do not try to go cheap when you're doing modifications to a Dodge. Just don't. You're going to be paying Dodge tax. Yes, you will. But you're going to come away with a significantly better product. It will be better in all aspects. Smoother, more fun to drive, not as many headaches from the drone. Those are the things that you're going to come away with. A little bit classier car. Where guys start to really screw up is when they try to do this Monty Hall deal. You know, well, if I do this, can I get that? Or what kind of deal can I get? You realize that even a guy like me won't touch, I'll put together something for a stock Hellcat. I will not mess with anything with pulleys because I just will not at all take on that liability. But a stock car is pretty easy. I won't even touch one for less than many dollars. So, and there's a reason for that. It comes with years of experience with these things. And I'm not even near the top of the food chain when it comes to Mopar stuff in general. So, go and make sure that you are dealing with somebody who speaks fluent Mopar and don't go cheap. Oh, Clay's talking about sixes. Yep. Tux is liking that TRD. They are nice. Oh, Heavy Hand was talking about the notchiness when shifting. Well, depending on how you're shifting, that clutch restrictor mod can help with that. But that the Tremec has always been a bit of a notchy transmission. It's one of the reasons why I never did put, or never had any plans, I should say, of putting a TKO in Foxy. And just sticking with the Borg Warner / Tremec Borg Warner design is because they're so silky to drive. But yeah, the Tremecs have always been a little bit more agricultural feeling. I actually really loved the T6 that was in my Vipers. I love those. So the 6060 is just a bit more of a robust version of that. But yeah, those Barton shifter is going to be the way to go, but those are always going to be a little bit on the stiff side. Tux is saying he does like the Titans. Chuck's saying Demons are way overpriced now in some areas. In a lot of areas they are, yeah. Clay's talking about the second gen Challenger. No. Clay's saying it would be nice for a Dodge Shelby relationship to happen again. The only problem with that is that Carroll Shelby's been dead for a long time, so I don't know if that relationship can be rekindled. Maybe it can in spirit. Randy's saying, I do believe everything you're saying about the Inline-six. I'm trying to wrap my head around the concept, but I grew up with cubic inches, ruled the street with enough torque to pull up the blacktop. See, that's the thing. There's no replacement for displacement except boost. And that's the thing. The thing with the Inline-six, the big difference in driving experience between a proper big block, like a legit big block, one that spins to about 5,500 RPM. I'm not talking about built to the sky, whatever. I'm talking about one that maybe you can spin to 5,500, but your shift point's 5,250. The big difference is in the tip-in throttle response. You just don't get that out of the six-cylinder. Not like what you would out of a big block where it's just bop, bop, you know, it's always, the thing is always ready to go. You won't get that out of the six until you rev it to about 4,000 RPM. And when you do that, you get the same hit, but you get the same hit from a roll. And it is an excitement that you can't really, it's something that you have to experience. And man, I just got to where I was infatuated with it. I loved the six-cylinder stuff. And, you know, because you have to remember, guys, at this point in time, especially during the development of really any of the V6 turbos, whether it's Nissan, Mitsubishi, any of the stuff from overseas, you had the inline, the RB26 from Nissan, which you'd know as a Skyline, really any of the inline threes. 2JZ, it was the most famous, but you kind of get the idea, which, by the way, there's nothing special about a 2JZ. They're freaking everywhere in Japan. They put that engine in everything. It's just they were NA versions of them. But it doesn't matter. Getting back to it, there was a point in time where the V8 was kaput, gone, no mas. It just wasn't going to be around anymore. At least that was the prevailing wind. And the Grand National, what I was talking about earlier, the Grand National / T-Type, the 2.3 liter Ford Turbo, the 2.2 liter that was in the GLH, the Shelby Daytona, that was the birth of what they thought was going to be the next generation of high performance. It just so happens that the same technology that you could get a six-cylinder to act right at 300 horsepower and get good fuel economy, well, it laterally worked in a V8. Multi-point fuel injection and all the rest of the et ceteras that come with it now turned a V8 engine that would be doing good to get 16 miles per gallon, 18 miles per gallon. Without any compromises, you're getting 22 to 25 miles per gallon out of the big V8. And in some cases, being better than the V6 in terms of economy. So it created a situation where, okay, well, the V8 was on its way out, but guess what? Now it's back in. But the V8 going out, basically the threat of the V8 going away created the technology. You got to get power out of a smaller engine. How do you do that? Well, multi-point fuel injection, turbos, supercharging, what have you. And now you had all these cars that were coming to us that were going to be awesome. And just think if that technology would have been fostered even more. You know, you would have had the next generation of RB26, the next generation of 2JZ, the next generation of insert whatever, it wouldn't matter. They would have all been real high performance engines. It's just that you wouldn't have that initial tip in hit that you have with the large displacement. But at the time, that large displacement initial hit lights the tires up, but then has to shift because it runs out of RPM and then falls on its face, at 85, 90 miles an hour because it can't rev out from the factory, of course. Well, now all the Turbo 6 guys are going, shoot, man, we can spin these things to whatever RPM we really want as long as the oiling system will keep up. Yeah. And we can go whatever seconds we want in the quarter mile with these things. This is great. And you had guys with Omnis and minivans and Dodge 600s and all kinds of funny little front wheel drive platforms getting out there and running in the 11s and in the 12s. The craziness. This was big V8 territory, and you're doing it with this itty bitty engine that in many cases was less than half the size of the V8 that it was at least running with. And if it wasn't running with it, depending on the state of tune, obviously, but if it wasn't running with it, it was certainly scaring it to death, which in many cases can be equally as fun. So, yeah, it's going to be weird, but it's going to be cool at the same time. Randy's saying the 440 was a starting point for building a street monster. And actually, the 440 is a good engine to talk about. I mean, we're talking about an engine that realistically, you wouldn't want to spin it past 5,000 RPM. I mean, there would be absolutely no head flow to get it there. The car was really good to about 4,700 RPM. But the tip-in throttle response with the 440 is its selling point. That's the reason why, again, everybody likes to talk about the Hemi. The Hemi, the Hemi, the Hemi, the Hemi, the Hemi, the Hemi, the Hemi. Here's the problem with the Hemi. It never got any star power. Every one of, at least the ones that I can remember off the top of my head, there was never a marquee movie car that was a Hemi. Vanishing Point, 440 car. Bullet Charger, 440 car. If you can think of one that was ever out there, I mean, I'm struggling to do it right now, but if you can think of one, enlighten me. But when Death Proof came out, the stunt girl car was the Vanishing Point 440 car. They didn't try to tart it up with the Hemi. They still went with the Wedge. And to that point, the Charger would have been a Wedge motor also. Generally wouldn't even be a Hemi car. That was a 383 car, if it was even that at all. So again, you start going through the list of movie cars that would have been, what would they have been? Well, they were all Wedge. Mickey Knox's Challenger would have been a Wedge car in Natural Born Killers. Just trying to go through the list here. Anyway, long story short, it's because the driving experience is better. It's because it's snappier and it's a fun engine and it's always making torque. It's just always a torquey engine. That's why they were so popular. Still are to this day. Oh, Clay's thinking that Dodge might do something with Shelby America. Probably not. Let's see. Oh, Randy's saying the Barton shifter made a world of difference in his SRT 392. Takes a lot of the notchiness. Yep. Oh, Greg's asking, or saying he installed a pedal commander in his 20 Ram 1500. Sure wakes it up. Yeah, it does. Do you see these installed on Hellcats? Absolutely. I see them installed on all Mopars. Or is it too much on a boosted car? No, it actually makes it a lot of fun. It actually, you need one if you go with the 309 gear, because you lose the load on the engine with the 309 gear that helps to make that boost response start to take place. Well, with the 309, you lose the load. So if you lose the load, you lose the boost. And that's mainly at partial throttle. So that's one of the mods that I recommend if you want to, kind of keep the thing flying somewhat under the radar. 309 gear and a pedal commander, pedal box, or what have you is kind of a fun way to go with the Hellcats. Sovereign saying, "Sup, beat, sup." Kaus is asking, maybe you've answered this before. 285 pulley is 93, 275 for Echo. That's kind of correct, yeah. Is that small difference between the two because the faster blower fits with the higher octane E85? Yes. So the 285 would be an extreme, like if you live at sea level, the 285 with a very I'm going to say very neutered tune. A 285 with a neutered tune will survive on 93 octane. 93 octane, not 91. Notice I'm not saying 91, 93. 93 octane, 285. Notice I'm not saying 91, 93 octane. Did I say 93 octane? 295 may be the actual functional limit for 91 octane, but it's a happy place for 93 octane. The 275, yeah, you're getting into a little bit too much blower speed at that point. You're just going to be making too much manifold pressure at that point, and you're going to need to have race gas or E85 to really legitimately get anything out of that pulley. If not, you're going to have the timing so far retarded that it's going to, you may actually end up making the same or even a little bit less than the 285, just with a little bit higher parasitic loss that you're going to have with that blower spinning that fast. We're talking incremental numbers here, but it still bears mentioning. That being said, when you start to look at what is really appropriate for the street, my go-to combination was a 295 upper on a stock Hellcat with a pinned crank. That was it. If you wanted to get a car that would be fun, guarantee yourself a 9-second pass in really good air, it would either be that pulley or Innovators West lower. Big fan of the Innovators West lower because it was a 9%. Works like a charm. You could go with the ATI, which was a 10% overdrive. With a stock pulley, that is about as much as you can go with the lower, and maybe still work with 93 octane, but even then it's a bit of a stretch. So in general, I would say pin the crank, go with a 295 upper if you want to run pump gas. 285, you're going to need boostane for sure, really to get the most out of it if you're living at an altitude that is 1,000 feet or less. 1,000 feet or more, you probably wouldn't need the boostane, but you just need to make sure that you have access to really good quality 93 octane. So hopefully that answers the question. And then if E85, you can E85 all of them. You can E85 a stock car for that matter, and see some fairly significant gains, because then you can run proper NA looking timing values in your Hellcat. Not that we don't kind of do that already with the stock cars, but you get the idea. 275 with a 10% lower is a Bravo package, and that combination right there is a mid 9-second car in good air. So just so you know. Oh, Clay's talking about some other front wheel drive stuff. Yeah, there was a lot of cool front wheel drive stuff back then. A lot of guys just, there was so much dismissal of the front wheel drive cars, which is a bit of a bummer. Um, guys just didn't want to mess with it. There was very few guys would really gravitate or grasp the idea that front wheel drive could be a legitimate muscle car, because they came from there's no replacement for displacement. And listen, if it rhymes, it has to be correct. It has to be true, right? So no replacement for displacement, guys. The Hemi, then the L. Yeah, I'd like to see one run with an L88 and all this other stuff. And it's like, really? Because finna learn today, Gramps. But the reality is that a lot of guys just didn't gravitate towards that stuff. It was a little bit too Euro, a little bit too tight pants for these guys, and there just wasn't a lot of adoption of it. But for the guys that did, and for the guys that understood where this could go, man, it was a huge deal. So if nothing else, it taught us that you can hurt a lot of feelings with these smaller displacement engines that are designed to run and be basically a life support system for a turbocharger. Let's see. Sovereign's asking, what do you think of this supposed new inline-six turbo for the next lineup of Mopars? Can't tell already. I'm itching to get my hands on one. Sovereign saying, the Dodge Spirit RT was a turbo front-wheel drive car, and it was one of the fastest four-door K cars at the time. It was the fastest at one point. So here's the thing, the Spirit, there's actually a guy, it's funny you mentioned this, there's a guy that has one, and it's red and gray, it's like that two-tone paint job, that runs one of those in the 8th mile. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's fast, but it's pretty darn quick, and it would definitely put a hurting on a lot of cars that you would consider it, as a contemporary of the time. So yeah, we still see one every once in a while. And every time I see the car, I have to say it. It's like, this time on Motor Week. I mean, it just reminds me of watching Motor Week when I was a kid, man. It's, like, where's John? I know he's going to pop out from behind the other side of the car. So, but yeah, man, I love those cars. And this is the thing. Nostalgia is funny because it's really painting those cars in a lot brighter light than what they were back then. But if you were in the know, if you were in the know back then, you could actually get one of those things and have a lot of fun with them. And I mean, I'll never forget the first time I saw a front wheel drive car doing a burnout, and I thought it was the neatest looking thing, having something smoke in the front tires. Sovereign saying he saw that. He saw the, yeah, exactly. He saw the Spirit. Oh, Sovereign saying he had a 94 non-RT. He said he loved it. Yeah. They're cool little cars, man. I like it. And the thing about it, again, is you get the impression that you're never going to see cars like that again. And you don't know what you got until it's gone, right? And, how much fun would it be to be able to play with one of those things again? The Neon and the SRT4 are kind of the last of the raw 90s, like 80s and mid 80s, or any of the 80s and 90s style front engine, hot roddy cars. Another one, and it's not a 4-cylinder, but do you guys remember the 3-liter Ford engine? What the hell was it? Like a Tempo or something like that. Anyway, a buddy of mine, his mom had one, and it's a car that he drove to high school. And after football practice, he'd give some of us rides home. Anyway, that was one of the cars that would just do stupid long, smoky front-wheel drive burnouts seemingly forever. So anyway, just memory lane here, but there's very few cars that really you can look at. In fact, there's nothing today that you can look at like you could those lightweight front-wheel drive cars from back then. They were just a completely different way of doing business back then. It was kind of sad we don't see any more of it. Clay's talking about the Z34 and the SHO. Yeah, kind of, but not really. The Spirit was a continuation of something that had already been, at that point in time, those cars would represent what a car would be basically if there was never going to be a V8. Thing about it is that that's not what it ended up being. A lot of folks forget you had other cars like the Probe GT. I had one, awesome car. That was going to be the Mustang until the backlash of Ford. I think Ford had announced they were going to have a front-wheel drive Mustang, and everybody flipped their shit, couldn't believe it. But yeah, that would have ended up being the Mazda. What was the Mazda version? Anyway, Mazda, it was basically a Mazda that they were sending out into the world. But anyway, lots of cool stories about cars from back then. I kind of miss those days just because the cars were simpler. No, they didn't have rear wheel drive. No, they didn't have V8s. They'd still smoke the tires though, and you could get into plenty of trouble with them, trust me. The funny thing is that in a lot of cases, they were just as fast, in some cases even faster than than some of the V8 cars that you would compare them to. It's funny too. A lot of people forget that a 396 Chevelle, depending on the 396 that you're talking about, was if you're lucky, a mid 15-second car. A lot of the big block muscle cars would be doing good. I mean, really good to run a mid 14. Most of them, unless they were the real high performance version of those cars, and we're talking about the big block cars here, would be doing, again, really good to cover a 15.8. I mean, that's crazy when you think about it. But that's how it was back then. And you know, the small block cars, I mean, I've seen stock 70, 71 Challengers run mid to high 15s in the quarter mile. I mean, it's not really something that you want to brag about, right? But that's what they ran back then. And it's not necessarily slow. They're torquey engines, and they just didn't breathe out the back door. But nevertheless, when you're only doing like 86, 85 in the quarter, by today's standards, you'd never call that a performance car. Sovereign saying he's going to send some pics of that Spirit. Very cool. Randy saying, I will admit that in my mind, my big block Roadrunner, Charger, and GTX were able to leap tall buildings and dang near needed a parachute, but I'm old and mine is shot. True that, man. Hey, listen, I'll be honest with you. You know, I'm reminded of those cars when I drive Sierra. You know, Sierra is a funny, Sierra's a funny algorithm in a way when you think about it, because 400 small block, 410 gears. The truck, last time I dragged it, and this is with the 4-hole spacer, the truck actually picked up about half a second with the 4-hole spacer. It's now running on the draggy. What did it run? Like a 1554, 1557. But the problem is that it's smoking the tires on its way to doing that. So if the truck would hook up, it's like if I put that truck on a drag strip in good air, it's a 14-second truck. Not too shabby, right? It just can't mile an hour at all because it's a 400 small block and it can't breathe. Gosh, that truck just needs to be rebuilt. I got to do, if I just did a rebuild with a set of aluminum heads, slightly different intake. Anyway, chop a couple of seconds, turn that thing into a 12-second truck. Anyway, the reality is that that's the number that it runs, right? So if we're talking about numbers, there's your number. But it's the theater and all the fun that you have leading up to that quarter-mile pass. It's the fact that I am killing every skeeter in a quarter-mile range when I take off in that thing. It's got all the sound. It's got all the everything about it. And then you're going, all right, here we go. What's it going to run? And it runs this number, and it's exciting. And that's what's funny is that Sierra, I hate to say it, but depending on the state of tune, Sierra will give a 383 Roadrunner all it can handle and then some. So it's just funny when you start to compare numbers and things like that. I got this old 3/4 ton GMC that runs really, really good, and it's got a worn ass out 400 in it, and it really needs to be re-geared. That 410's got to come out of that thing. This year, I would really like to re-gear it with the 354 gears, and that way the truck would at least have some legs going down the highway. Definitely needs that. Plus, first gear is completely useless with that 400 small block because it is all the torque all the time, like right now. Oh, Clay's talking about the 442 W30. Had a buddy of mine in college that had one. Actually tuned his carburetor. Olds 442 is a beast. It is a beast indeed. But the 455, probably the Olds 455, pretty much any of the BOP, the Buick Oldsmobile Pontiac, any of the BOP 455s suffered from oiling issues, kind of a potential oiling issue. They also had large, and this is kind of a 400 small block issue also, large mains. And you think, well, it can handle more load. Sort of, but it just can't handle RPM because the RPM at the surface, because it's a larger diameter, the RPM or the speed, the bearing speed at any RPM is going to be higher, so oiling can potentially be an issue. So if you're going to build a hot rod, better off with a 400 BOP than you would a 455 BOP. Not to say you can't make a lot of power with them, they just require some modifications to that oiling system. But the other side of it is just don't spin the damn thing. Don't try to get 6,500 RPM out of one of those things. Spin it to $5 grand, 5,200, and soak up all that sweet, delicious torque. And with that, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. We're coming up on 2 hours. But I want to thank each and every one of you guys for hanging out with me tonight. Would not do this without you. Love each and every one of you. If you're going to send it, don't bend it. Keep your shiny side up. Ray, miss you, love you. And with that, that's a wrap. Catch up with you later. Have a great one. Adios.